Greetings, visionaries, aesthetes, and explorers of the cognitive frontier. Welcome to Cogitart, your digital sanctuary dedicated to decoding the most profound enigmas of art history. I am your guide on this aesthetic odyssey, and today we stand before a precipice. We are about to abandon the solid ground of Cartesian logic to plunge into the turbulent, oniric, and often terrifying waters of one of the greatest architects of the 20th century imagination, Max Ernst. Before we step through the looking glass and lose ourselves in his forest of symbols, I have a vital request for our community. If you believe that art is an indispensable tool for the expansion of consciousness, subscribe to the channel now. Your engagement is the fuel that keeps our lantern lit in these dark tunnels of history. Send this video to your study groups, your sleepless friends, and your family. Let us, together, transform art appreciation into a collective movement. Now I invite you to an exercise in deconstruction. Take a deep breath. Visualize the environment around you. The solid walls, the firm floor, the coherent light entering through the window. Now, imagine that the chemistry of reality begins to alter. Imagine that the wooden floorboards beneath your feet begin to breathe, transforming into a petrified forest. Imagine that the texture of a dry leaf expands until it becomes the wing of a monstrous angel. Imagine that the birds crossing the sky are not biological animals but fragments of your own psyche, messengers from a world where physics does not apply. Is it difficult to sustain this image? It is precisely in this interregnum, this liminal space where reason capitulates and imagination assumes the throne, that Max Ernst operated throughout his life. Stay with me until the very last second of this transmission. We are not merely going to look at paintings. We are going to dissect the anatomy of a genius. We will unravel, layer by layer, technique by technique, how he forged these parallel universes, clarifying the nuances often missed by casual observers, such as the true origins of decalcomania and the specific nature of his influence on abstract expressionism. Take my hand. The journey through the surreal begins now. To truly penetrate the hermetic labyrinth of Max Ernst's art, it would be a fatal error to begin with his consecrated paintings. Art is not born in a vacuum. It is forged in the fire of human experience. We must, first and foremost, understand the man and the historical cataclysm that molded him. Born in 1891 in Brühl, Germany, Ernst was not a rebel without a cause. On the contrary, he was the son of Philipp Ernst, a teacher of the deaf and an amateur painter of strict religious discipline. Max was a young prodigy immersed in the abysses of speculative philosophy, the nascent psychoanalytic theory of Freud, and classical art history at the University of Bonn. He devoured writings on the interpretation of dreams with the same voracity with which he contemplated the disturbing paintings of the Renaissance masters and the somber landscapes of German romantics like Caspar David Friedrich. He was obsessed with the hidden mechanisms of the mind, the shadows that inhabit the unconscious, and the Freudian slips where the truth reveals itself. However, theory would soon be crushed by the brutal practice of reality. In 1914, Europe plunged into the Great War. Ernst was conscripted into the German artillery, serving for 4 long years on both the Western and Eastern fronts. For him, the trench was not a field of honor. It was the moral bankruptcy of Western civilization. In his autobiography, he wrote a sentence that echoes like an epitaph. Max Ernst died on August 1, 1914. He was resurrected on November 11, 1918. This is not a gratuitous poetic metaphor. It is a philosophical declaration. The Max who died was the believer in reason, scientific positivism, social order, and the linear progress of Europe. The world that had educated him, the world of academic logic and technology, was the same world that had industrialized death, produced mustard gas, and pulverized millions of young men in the mud of Verdun and the Somme. If reason led to this, Ernst concluded, then reason is a lie. The only honest response, the only ethical stance possible in the face of such catastrophe, was to embrace the absurd. Ernst emerged from the war with a profound disdain for the aesthetic values that had comforted the bourgeoisie of the 19th century. He returned to Cologne, not as a soldier, but as a ghost haunting the machinery of society. It was here, alongside figures like Johannes Bargeld and Jean Arp, that he founded the Cologne branch of Dada. It is crucial to distinguish Cologne Dada from its counterparts in Zurich or Berlin. While Zurich Dada was often about performance and sound poetry, Cologne Dada was intensely visual and political. The weapon Ernst chose for this visual guerrilla warfare was the collage. But make no mistake, his collages were distinct from the papiers-collés of the Cubists like Picasso or Braque. The Cubists used collage to analyze form. Ernst used it to destroy meaning. Let us closely observe the lithographic portfolio Fiat modes, Perrite Ars, 1919, or the gouache collage, The Hat Makes the Man, 1920. Ernst armed himself with surgical scissors to cut illustrations from sales catalogs, 19th century physics manuals, biology diagrams, and Victorian fashion magazines. The visual guide to deciphering this phase is the concept of semantic rupture. Ernst juxtaposes images that, by logic, should never meet. He takes the engraving of a steam engine and fuses it with a female body. He connects an anatomy diagram to a clockwork mechanism. Unlike the Cubists, who left the edges of their paper visible, Ernst often sought a seamless integration, painting over the joins in a technique sometimes called overpainting, to create a hallucinatory unity. He takes the icons of progress, the machine, science, industry, and reassembles them to reveal their nightmare potential. Beauty, for him, ceased to be the classical harmony of forms. The new beauty was, quoting the Comte de Lautréamont, the dark prophet of the surrealists, the chance meeting on a dissecting table of a sewing machine and an umbrella. When facing a Dadaist collage by Ernst, do not ask, "What does this mean?" That is the question of the rational mind he wishes to destroy. Ask yourself, what does this dissonance make me feel? Dadaism was the demolition. Surrealism was the architecture. Ernst moved to Paris in 1922, integrating himself into the circle of André Breton just before the publication of the first Surrealist Manifesto in 1924. Here, Max Ernst transitions from saboteur to explorer. Unlike Salvador Dalí, who painted his dreams with photographic, academic precision, effectively illustrating the unconscious, Ernst wanted something more radical. He sought psychic automatism. He wanted to eliminate the hand of the conscious artist entirely. This leads us to the technique that became his mystical signature, frottage. The genesis of this technique is legendary. On August 10, 1925, while staying at a seaside hotel in Pornic, Brittany, Ernst fixed his gaze on the worn floorboards of his room. The grooves of the wood, accentuated by years of scrubbing, seemed to form hallucinatory images. Inspired by a passage from Leonardo da Vinci regarding finding figures in wall stains, Ernst decided not to draw what he saw, but to capture the structure of the matter itself. He placed sheets of paper over the floor and rubbed them with soft graphite. The result was a revelation. What emerged on the paper was not merely a copy of the wood. They were impenetrable forests, watchful eyes, phantasmagorical birds. He did not create these images. He evoked them. He acted as a medium. Let us analyze the series Histoire Naturelle, Natural History, 1926. The visual guide to frottage requires that you pay attention to ontological duality. Your eye recognizes the real texture, the wood, the leaf, the wire mesh, the twine, but your mind sees the oniric image. Ernst intervenes minimally. With a line here and a shadow there, he transforms the texture of a piece of dry bread into the skin of a prehistoric animal. The forest in Ernst is an obsessive theme, seen in works like The Great Forest. These are not bucolic landscapes. They are psychic labyrinths, dense, suffocating, often illuminated by a solar eclipse or a moon imprisoned in the branches. They represent the unconscious, a place of wonders, but also of ancestral dangers. Before moving to his painting techniques, we must acknowledge a unique contribution Ernst made to literature and art. The collage novel. Works like La Femme 100 Têtes, The 100-Headed Woman, 1929, and Une Semaine de Bonté, A Week of Kindness, 1934, are masterpieces of this genre. Using Victorian wood engravings from cheap 19th century novels, Ernst cut and pasted scenes to create a seamless, non-linear narrative of violence, eroticism, and absurdity. He subverted the very medium of bourgeois entertainment. In these books, drawing rooms are invaded by floods, women have wings, and men have lion heads. It is crucial to note the seamlessness here. Unlike his Dada works, you cannot see the glue. The nightmare is presented as a documentary fact. The evolution of frottage, which is graphic, was grattage, scraping, applied to oil painting. The process involved covering the canvas with multiple layers of paint, often hiding bright colors beneath dark ones. While the paint was still wet, he would place the canvas over textured objects, grates, fish bones, ropes, wood, and scrape the surface with palette knives. The result is visible in masterpieces like The Horde, 1927. Monstrous anthropomorphic figures emerge from the chaos. But observe closely. These figures were not drawn. They were excavated. The texture of the skin of these monsters is the physical result of the object that was underneath the canvas. The visual guide here is tactility. The surface is uneven, geological. Grattage allowed him to create a materiality that suggests erosion and deep time. In the entire city series, grattage creates the effect of ancient, ruined civilizations rising from the vegetation. It is painting simulating nature itself in its process of creation and destruction. No analysis of Max Ernst would be complete without his personal mythology. Loplop, the bird superior. The obsession with birds stems from a childhood trauma Ernst narrates in his biographical notes. He recounts that on the night his sister Lonnie was born, his pet bird, Hornibom, died. In the magical thinking of the young Max, a transfer of vital energy occurred. The sister had sucked the life out of the bird. This confusion between human and avian life created a psychic scar that transformed into art. Loplop is Ernst's alter ego. He appears in dozens of works as a geometric shamanic entity, often acting as a presenter, holding a frame within the frame. But the bird also carries a terrible omen. Look at the Fireside Angel, 1937. Painted in the shadow of the Spanish Civil War and the rise of fascism, this work shows a grotesque bird monster trampling the landscape. It is Loplop transformed into an apocalyptic beast. It is Ernst's visual response to the barbaric irrationality that was about to swallow Europe again. It is a scream of pure terror, distinct from the cool detachment of his earlier work. Between the wars, Ernst's life was defined by intense relationships. His time with the British surrealist Leonora Carrington is legendary. They moved to Saint-Martin-d'Ardèche in southern France, creating a sanctuary known as the House of Fear. Here, the distinction between life and art evaporated. They created sculptures and paintings that guarded their home. But history intervened. With the outbreak of W2, Ernst, a German in France, was labeled an enemy alien and imprisoned in the Camp de Mille. It was a betrayal by his adopted country. Through the intervention of friends like Paul Eluard and later the American heiress Peggy Guggenheim, he managed to escape the Nazis, who had labeled his work Entartete Kunst, or degenerate art. It was during this period of turmoil that Ernst adopted and perfected decalcomania. We must be precise here to satisfy the historians among us. Ernst did not invent decalcomania. The technique was introduced to the surrealist circle by the Spanish artist Oscar Dominguez in 1936. However, it was Ernst who mastered it in oil painting and used it to define his late style. The process consists of spreading fluid paint over a smooth surface, like glass, and pressing the canvas against it. The suction creates fractal patterns resembling coral, moss, or eroded rock. The magnum opus of this phase is Europe after the Reign de Sectu, 1940-42. Painted largely during his exile, it is a post-human landscape. There is no recognizable architecture. What we see is a wasteland of forms that look like calcified bones mixed with mutant vegetation. The visual guide for this phase is the pareidolic gaze. Ernst looked at these chaotic stains and found figures within them. In Europe after the Reign, we see petrified figures, bulls, and spears fused to the rock. It is a devastating metaphor for the war. Europe was not just destroyed, it was decomposed, fossilized. Ernst arrived in the United States in 1941, eventually settling in Sedona, Arizona, with the artist Dorothea Tanning. The landscape of Arizona, with its strange rock formations, seemed to mirror his own decalcomania paintings, a case of nature imitating art. It is here that we must address the connection to abstract expressionism. In 1942, for the exhibition First Papers of Surrealism, Ernst created the work Young Man Intrigued by the Flight of a Non-Euclidean Fly. To achieve the lines in this painting, he used a technique called oscillation. He punched a hole in a can of paint, suspended it from a string, and swung it over the canvas. Jackson Pollock saw this. While Pollock famously denied direct influences, art historians widely acknowledge that Ernst's oscillation technique was a precursor to Pollock's drip method. The difference lies in intent. Ernst used it to generate imagery that he would then define. Pollock used it as a pure record of action. Ernst provided the spark that helped ignite the American abstract expressionist movement. In Sedona, Ernst turned his attention to sculpture. He was a bricoleur, a tinkerer. He collected debris, egg cartons, car parts, stones, and used them as molds for plaster, which was later cast in bronze. His sculptural masterpiece, Capricorn, 1948, was created in the heat of the Arizona desert. It represents a king and a queen, deities of a forgotten mythology, guarding his home. The king's scepter is made from a car shock absorber. His head mimics the horned Kachina dolls of the Hopi people, whom Ernst admired deeply. The visual guide here is recontextualization. Ernst teaches us that the sacred can be constructed from the trash of modern civilization. He creates guardians for a secular world. Max Ernst eventually returned to Europe in 1953, settling in Ceylon, France, where he continued to work until his death in 1976. But his legacy was already cemented. He was the man who looked at a floorboard and saw a forest. He was the soldier who died in 1914 and resurrected as a shaman. He taught us that the role of the artist is not to copy reality, but to interrogate it. His influence is incalculable, from the texture of science fiction landscapes to the psychological depth of modern horror. Ernst's DNA is everywhere. He proved that the subconscious is not just a basement of repression, but a landscape of infinite potential. The challenge he throws at us is that of interpretive freedom. Before his works, your intuition is the only authority. Do not be afraid of not understanding. The beauty in Ernst lies in the mystery, in that which escapes the word and touches directly the nerve of the imagination. I hope this deep dive into the mind of Max Ernst has altered the way you perceive the world. If you hunger for beauty and thirst for accuracy in art history, I reiterate my invitation. Join the Legion of Cogitart. Subscribe, activate notifications, and leave your comment below. Which technique, frottage, grattage, or decalcomania, most resonates with your own view of the world? I am your guide on this journey. Thank you for your attentive and generous company. Keep your eyes open and your spirit restless. Until our next artistic adventure,